I'm just going to start with a little PowerPoint just to set the scene, I guess, just to explain our background and give you an example of some of the types of businesses we work with, and then we'll sort of run through the software, and we'll basically just go through a sort of full scenario from estimate through to through all the functions, procurement, capturing time in the field, that sort of thing, through to billing, I guess.
I guess just to give you a quick overview, because we have supplier agreements in place with a number of volume builders, we automatically get all of their work in certain locations.
Yep. Okay. So I was going to ask that. Looking at your website, it looks like you must be doing a lot of slabs for residential building. Is that right? Looking at your website.
That's pretty much most of what we do. Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
So there are schedules of rates with each customer. So when they send us an order or orders every day, those prices are already locked in. There's no quoting or estimating required.
Yep.
We do have some exceptions to that rule, but the vast majority of them are just based on, this is your work, this is the slab details, your drawings, there's your price, away you go.
Understand. Yep. Yeah, cool. So yeah, that could be all easily templated using our quoting module. So basically you get a new order through, it's this type of job, bang, copy the quote template through, push it through to a project. So you're not going back to first principles estimating each time for these jobs as they come through. So no, that would be fine. All right. Do we want to start pushing through or wait for the chat to come
give it another minute, and Jack has to just have a quick break, and then we'll wait till he gets back, and if the others join us, if they're going to join us, they'll probably be here very shortly. If not, they won't.
Now, the other thing actually I noticed on the website while I had a bit of a nosy, because you do mention doing things like civil works and stuff as well. I mean, how much of that are you doing, or is it really you're just cutting the site for doing the concrete work? I mean, are you doing any sort of real earthworks or?
Not from my experience in my short time here. It's pretty much just site cuts and excavations, retaining walls, just for the small block before we actually prepare the slab. There is a commercial side of the business, which is a separate legal entity, which does slightly larger scale concrete packages for main contractors. But from a civil works perspective, yeah, I don't think there's much in the way of heavy civil operations going on.
Okay. And are you doing most of that work yourself? Like, have you got your own equipment for doing that sort of stuff? Excavators and
we've got large
dozers and those.
A lot of it's 2/3 of it is subcontractors and their own equipment.
Okay. Yep. So you're letting it. I guess an order or a subcontract to these guys. So it's fixed price stuff for when you're engaging these subbies.
Oh, we try to get a fixed price.
Again, they're on agreed rates per square metre. Yeah. For most of it. So Jack has to send them a purchase order for each job, and then they submit their invoices for the weekly pay runs.
We have to send that purchase order at the end of every week, and not after the work has already been completed. We have to send the order, just with the way things are at the moment, because it's not as streamlined as we'd like.
So these contractors, presumably, they're the sort of, you got the same pool of contractors you're engaging all the time, are you, for a lot of this sort of stuff?
Yes.
Yeah. And are they sort of working on a regular basis for you guys, are they?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So we do actually have a contractor portal option where in actual fact, and it supports the scheduler rate stuff really well. So we have this in place with Main Roads WA, whereby for all the roading maintenance up there, all the contractors who are all signed up with scheduler rates, they log in each day and fill in their dockets each day for when they work. And what happens is Main Roads generates a buyer created invoice or an RCTI at the end of each week to pay them for basically the work they've done. So which really streamlined their the whole process for engaging all of their contractors for road maintenance. So that sort of scenario could work quite well. it lends itself very well to scheduler rates, and the idea is that contractors are logging their dockets each day. You sign off the dockets, and then just pay them for the dockets you've logged at the end of the week. So, all right. Should we move through?
Let's get moving. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess the scenario that really, I mean, what Workbench is about. Workbench is around, I guess, financial accountability and applying that to operations, basically. So Workbench is all around the financial management of projects. We deal with other things, but predominantly we're about the financial management and delivery of projects. But Workbench has been developed and it is very much positioned for the operational people. Okay, so the look and feel is the sort of system that the operational people are going to look at and say, "Oh, that looks nice. I want to go and use that." You know what I mean? They're not. It's not scary for operational people. It uses terminology they're familiar with. It looks like a project management system. It's a key fundamental. We're a mature product. We've been around a long time. So Workbench has evolved over 25 years. We operate internationally. We're a multi-entity, multi-currency system. Okay, so we can support multi-entities within the same system. We deal with a lot of the complex accounting scenarios. We cross-charging resources and recovering between entities and all that sort of stuff. So we handle those sort of operational complexities. Technology-wise, so our data is hosted in AWS. Okay, so it's secure. We very much are aligned with Microsoft technology, so we see ourselves as being a sort of a pretty core business system. And for most of the companies we're dealing with, they use Microsoft technology as the backbone of most of their businesses. They're using Office 365. They might be using SharePoint. They use Outlook for their email. So we align very well with that. And we do integrate with Office 365, and we offer Office 365 authentication, which again makes it a lot simpler for managing users and passwords and that sort of thing, because it's just a single point of entry. Just so you know, key markets for us, we obviously doing projecting, and obviously that covers a range of different industries and markets, but our first choice or our primary market is the civil space, and again, even that in itself is quite broad. But historically, we've always been a very strong solution for companies who are self-performing the work, and in particular, civil. Obviously, in most cases, civil or companies involved in civil projects are often self-performing the vast majority of the work, and civil tends to have the most wide-ranging different types of resource inputs required to deliver a project. So you've got labour inputs, you've got equipment inputs, you might have some procurement going on, you might be engaging subbies, you might have stock because you've got a quarry, these sort of things. So you've got all these different inputs that have to go into delivering a project. Civil tends to be the most complex, and we tend to excel in that space because we deal with all those things at a very low level of detail, basically. Whereas something like the trades, I guess, same sort of thing, but they might not have the equipment requirement. So as I said, Workbench tends to be strong for companies that are self-performing the work. That's our key strength. You might have seen this just previously. This is basically just to illustrate the types of functionality available within Workbench. We can do estimating. We'll touch on quoting today. We are not a specialist estimating tool. We aren't the best in the world at estimating. Our estimating is reasonably generic. Probably, I suspect, it's probably actually not going to be too far off the mark from what you guys would be using. But certainly, once we start getting into specialist areas, we don't pretend to be, a specialist estimating tool. Workbench is really around managing the delivery of the project. So whether you use our tools to price up a job, or whether you price up a job in an Excel spreadsheet or some external system, you can import the budget. And Workbench is really focused on delivering that job and delivering all of the different, functional items involved in delivering the job. So dealing with the procurement, dealing with the timesheets, dealing with the the equipment issues, and so on. And basically, to deal with those different inputs, there's a range of operational modules that you pick and choose depending on your requirement. The idea of feeding all that data in, Workbench is going to give you all your job cost reporting and analysis, and any data that's captured in Workbench gets fed up into the accounting platform, obviously for all your statutory reporting, for doing all your banking, all your payroll, all those sort of things. But as I say, typically Workbench is designed as a sort of feeder system, so it's feeding data up into the accounting ledgers. Off the main system, so what you see here in the solid blue, that's the sort of, I guess, what you'd call a desktop system. We then have a full mobile solution on top of that to basically empower the field, and that covers a whole range of functions, from scheduling people and equipment to jobs, daily site diaries, compliance things in the field, so doing things like equipment pre-starts, can be things like control documents, like traffic management plans, hazard checklists in the field, could be doing day dockets for contractors who are working for you, all that sort of stuff. And that obviously feeds seamlessly up into Workbench. All right. And then obviously there's a range of reporting options over the top. Okay, so any questions on that?
No.
Okay, so just touch on a couple of sites just to give you an idea on some of the businesses we work with. So like large scale civil contractors we deal with, so people like McConnell Dow, they've been a client of ours for 20 years. So this is sort of top end of town type clients. Large scale earth moving contractors, so Lucas out in South Australia, so they have about 700 pieces of heavy plant, so large scale equipment operation. Then getting down into some more local people that you might have cross paths with. So Multiworks in Brooklyn, these guys do underground services, predominantly electrical, but these guys were involved in down in Geelong just recently, the Ford plant, when it was all repurposed for commercial. It's a commercial site, they did all the underground services work there, as an example. In terms of businesses like yourselves, so these guys would, I would suggest these guys would be equivalent to you guys. So GBG Construction down in Sale, these guys, same thing, concrete and formwork. Ardre Formwork, these would be one of our larger concreting clients. So these guys doing large scale formwork, so they're involved in Westgate Tunnel, they're involved in the Flinders Street underground station works, so on, so probably slightly bigger. And then someone like LB Concreting as well. Similar sort of business to yourselves again. So what we'll do, we'll jump out of this and we'll have a look at the solution. So I'll just log out here just so you can see. So this is Workbench. Obviously, it's all browser based. My demonstration doesn't use Office 365 because it's just a generic username and password I'm logging in with. So you can have either or. So username, password, log in. This is what I see when I log in. So on my home page, I have menu down the left-hand side. Okay. Menu covers a range of different functions. The menus are role-based, so depending on my login or the role I'm assigned it with my login, when I log in, I'll see more or less menu functions. I have some shortcut tiles on my desktop here. Again, you can actually create your own shortcut tiles. So if I take leave regularly and I want a shortcut to have leave on my desktop, I can do that, and I can color code it and things like that if I want. Let's go and get rid of that. Oops. We're a modern web-based platform, so a lot of the things we do within the application and online. So things like managing document approvals. So see here, I've got a tile for my approvals list. So here's a whole range of different types of documents all assigned to my user for action, and there's various actions, approval, review, or whatever. So things like invoices, purchase orders, subby claims, vouchers, etc. These various documents, if I go and open them up, so if it's something like a a voucher. So this is a supplier's invoice we've received, lodged via our vouchering, and then pushed it out for approval. You'll see here this has the supplier's invoice document embedded there. And the idea is that this would go out via our workflow engine. So we have a workflow engine which can be extensively configured depending on what rules you want to apply. These vouchers get pushed out to the appropriate person, whether it's a purchase order approver, the project manager on the job, whatever. He'll get an email alert. It'll be on his desktop. He logs in. He can approve this. Once this document's sort of coded and approved, that will then get pushed up into, say, Wiise for payment, basically. And obviously that cost is reported on the job, obviously, as well. Going back on the home page, you'll see also I have in-system alerts and notifications. This is more sort of ad hoc type things. So, you know, with things like documents and so on, you know, purchase orders, things like that, you can jump into a document and you can message around internally, hey, hurry up and approve this, you know, these sort of things. So there's a sort of notifications function. And then what you see here in the center of the home page, this is a management dashboard. So we have a BI tool called Sharperlight, which we distribute with Workbench. So if you want to have things like management dashboards and so on, you can have your own management dashboards embedded within the application. And they can be like this sort of thing on the home page. As an example, this one's just giving me a snapshot of all my open projects grouped by job manager. And it's giving me a summary of the original margin, the margin on the variations. Now, this one incorporates cost to complete forecasting. So it's also giving me a view on forecast final margin and a trend to indicate whether the final margin on the job is better or worse than our starting margin, as an example. But these reports could look like anything you like. If it's, I'm not sure what sort of equipment you might have, but, you know, looking at something else like our operating equipment, you know, this is looking at productive hours per month by equipment group and then by equipment item. And then we might be looking at, you know, financial performance by equipment item as an example. So, you know, revenue generated and operating cost per equipment item. So, you know, as an example, do you have much in the way of equipment?
We do, but it doesn't get costed to jobs at the moment, which is obviously something we'd like to consider.
Okay. Yeah. So we run, so for every, so put it this way, as part of the resources we manage in terms of delivering a project, we manage the fleet. We cost it to a job when we use it. So obviously we reflect the cost of using that equipment on the project, and then the equipment recovers. So we use basically recovery costing. The equipment recovers that time back against itself at that rate, and then obviously we can compare the recoveries to the operating cost of that equipment to understand basically how that equipment's performing. All right. So what we'll do, I'll just run through a quick job scenario. Now, I'll be honest, I mocked up a little example for you, just so it was in context, but I didn't start at a quote. So you'll have to imagine the quote, but I'll talk through quotes anyway, just so you get the full life cycle. So the idea is here, if we start with quotes, in the quote, you've got a register of all your quote items, okay? If I look at something like Port Melbourne crossover is probably the closest one. So if I drill into it, each quote has a quote code, it's got a revision number, you've got a description of it, details, so various sort of key attributes. So then the details of the quote are built up via cost sheets. Now you can have one big cost sheet for the whole quote, or if the quote is broken up into different areas, let's say design, fabrication, installation, you might have a separate cost sheet as an example. Okay, so you're sort of not locked into anything. But the key thing is when we create a cost sheet, these can all be templated. Okay, and the cost sheet can have all the details. So if you've got these different scheduler rates with these different volume builders, that could all be driven via cost sheet template. So you just pick the appropriate cost sheet template from the appropriate builder, it would bring it forward. Then you might drill into that cost sheet, into the appropriate dimensions, because I'm assuming the slabs are based on dimensions, and then that would basically produce your estimate. When I jump into one, so if I jump into this cost sheet here for the crossover removal works, this is just giving me the summary values, by the way. But when I jump into this, and I jump into the lines, here's the build-up of what's going into that crossover removal. And this is what would all sit in the cost sheet. So you'll see something like demolishing the existing concrete. If I click on the calculator, here's the different cost items that are going into it. So I need some unskilled labor. There's half an hour for whatever reason. I need a Hitachi excavator for half an hour, and I need $10 worth of PPE as an example. So here's all the cost items that are going into it. On the top section here, so depending on how you want to price things up, you can use this a bit like a bill of material. So this could be for 1 square meter, and if I was doing 20 times 10, when we go and say when I'm pricing up this area of demolition to be done, it'll multiply out the component rates, if you like, to give you a sort of total cost price. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So anyway, so that's the idea. So you can build up basically your estimates this way, however you like. And then the idea being that once you've got your estimate there, then there's a process. So you can raise the job. So you create a new job here, and then you can create the budget, and then if you need to, create a claim schedule if you're billing based on a schedule of work. So the idea is it rolls all the way through from the quote to the job. When it rolls through to the job, so if we jump to the next step. Oh, sorry, I should actually mention before I jump off here as well. If there's specific fields you want, you can have custom fields here on extension columns, and then you can also link and associate any other, files, plans, drawings, whatever paperwork can all be associated with the quote here. So you can attach and link files here, like dragging files up to here, and it'll all be sort of contained within the quote. So then when it becomes a job, so if I go to jobs, so this is the first bit. So in the jobs screen, because we're essentially a projecting or jobbing system, everything we do is pretty much against a job. Okay. This screen's got some filters at the top here, so you can filter by a range of different parameters to get the right list of jobs. We do have quite extensive parameters and user permissions, so we can enforce business rules like, for instance, when a job manager logs in, we might want him to only see his jobs. We might, if our business has been departmentalized and we've got different operating departments or divisions within the entity, and we want to lock individuals into certain departments, again, we can apply all these sorts of rules within our configuration. But basically here, I can see my list of jobs. At a glance, I can click on job financials and see a snapshot financial summary of how all those jobs are looking. So what the revenue budget was, cost budget, what the margin was, revenue to date, so approved and unapproved revenue, total revenue, cost to date, what margin I'm making, percentage complete, and the value of outstanding orders. So I've got a snapshot glance of it financially of where all my jobs are. Now, if I go, I can't remember the job number, but I know it's towards the end here. I set a job up for you guys, Shojun Concrete. Shojun? Is that the way you say it? Shojun?
Yeah.
So off the job here, off the little blue disco ball, I can go into some related functions. So the first thing we'll jump into is the inquiry. Okay, so if I jump into the inquiry, what this gives me, and we're in July now, my system hasn't updated. This gives me a snapshot view of the job at this point in time. So I can see for the financial period, what the revenue is for the month and what the costs incurred have been for the month. And then there's an hour's snapshot down below here. And then I can see year to date, life to date, and against budget. Now, again, if you're doing short jobs, probably doesn't matter too much, but for any bigger job, obviously, you've got that nice view of how they're performing at the different sort of stages there. You'll see this cost summary. Now, this all comes from your cost coding. This is a summation of individual cost items, which we're going to look at next. So the individual cost items that you define, if I jump in the detail here, this is where we're going to start looking at them. So in the detail, so for this project, I just made up some stages. I don't actually know how you do a job, but I just made up some stuff. So I've said that there was, for this project, there was some engineering and management activity, 40 hours. There was some earthworks we had to do. So we had 72 hours budgeted for earthworks. There was all the form work, and then there was actually the concreting. Okay, so those are my 4 sort of areas I'm managing within the job. Underneath each of these, when I expand it out, that will take me down into the individual cost items. And again, this is where you have total flexibility, total control as to how you define these things. At this activity level, you see I've got a management and supervision activity called project management, and that's where I've allowed my budget. I've also got some material costs, so some fees and license costs. So maybe I've got to pay some council fees or something, I don't know, as part of this project. When I look at something like earthworks, you'll see I've got some labor, so I need a plant operator. I've got some general material costs, so some dump fees, because maybe we've got to dispose of some stuff. And then you see I've got plant costs, I've got a dump truck and an excavator. And you see they've got budgeted hours and then actual cost budget against each item. All of these things, so see how project management, I've got an actual quantity. These are all drill down, so I can drill right through and see the underlying transaction. So that project management time, that's come from Justin Gardner on the 26th of July, which was yesterday, 8 hours, that's the cost of my time, and that's sort of come through from a timesheet. Okay. So, you know, I guess conceptually, and bear in mind, this is just my take on one of your jobs as a mock-up. Is this how you would see the world in terms of delivering a project, something similar?
Yeah, pretty much. Just different names, different activities, isn't it?
Yeah.
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the key thing is it's more about understanding the elements. The number of cost codes and what you call things. Obviously, that's all down to you, because so you define your structure. Within this sort of inquiry view, obviously you've got the ability to also go through and look at any open orders on the job, what's been invoiced to date. There's a sort of document section here where we can produce standard type contract documents. So if we've got to send a site instruction or an RFI, these sort of things, they can be generated from within here. There is a dashboard option, which there won't be much on this, but you can have the dashboards embedded within here, which have some stats about the job. There's not much data on this job at the moment. But that's really the job inquiry. Now, all jobs start here. Okay, so, you know, your scenario, the volume side of the business, which is churning through these house slabs, come in, quote, flick it over to a job, it'll sit here, capture the costs, bill it when it's done. So all jobs start here. If some of those jobs end up being bigger, then what we can do, we can roll that up into what we call a contract. And from here, if I go to the contractual view, this is dealing with your larger projects, which are, you know, might be spanning a longer period of time, whether you're trying to track, you know, revisions to the scope of work, where there might be a claim schedule involved, where there might be things like retentions and so on. So this will deal with your larger projects, okay? And when we move into contracts, because those projects tend to span a longer period of time, we can start getting into things like cost to complete forecasting. We can get into project cash flows, things like a progress claim as an example. So when I look at a progress claim that we would raise here, when we do a progress claim, you know, you'd have your schedule of items, you come into here, you can claim against each item as you complete it. And then, so things like retentions, the system will automatically handle and calculate. Then we can do things like these sort of documents. So here's my progress claim, contract value plus variations, claim to date, less retention, balance to completion, and there's the schedule sort of sitting behind it. Okay, so the idea is these sort of things would be generated out of the system and pushed out for certification and review. Any questions so far?
No, that's good.
All right. So that, as I said, so that will deal with the bigger stuff. Then, I guess in the day-to-day sort of job activity, if we just cover off some of the different functions we have here. So typically on a job, there's a range of different sort of ways we deal with procurement. So if we just tick off the items, you want to raise a purchase order, like an ad hoc purchase order, you can just jump in and raise a purchase order. Okay, so pretty standard purchase ordering process. Depending on how complex your procurement process is, it might be that it has to go through a number of hands before we actually raise a purchase order. So there's a whole requisitioning function if you want, which is pre-purchase order. If you are formally engaging people on larger packages of work, you can also let subcontracts if you want. So again, subcontracts, basically it's a multi-point engagement basically. So rather than just when you raise a purchase order and you send it to a supplier, with a subcontract you can have multiple works orders within that subcontract, and then it also does things like allows you to hold retention and those sort of things if you want. So there's that. Then in terms of some of the other stuff that you might be procuring, so things like concrete and that, I'm assuming a lot of that is based on scheduler rates. Is that correct?
What's the question, sorry?
So like when you're like concrete supply for all these slabs and that you're doing this volume stuff, I'm assuming a lot of that scheduler rates, is it?
Oh yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Depending on the builder.
So one of the things sorry.
We're talking about procuring it. So buying materials.
Oh, well, it's different for every supplier.
Yeah, they just have obviously regular price increases at the moment, and let us know how much the new rates are.
So one of the things we do a lot of in terms of volume materials, like particularly with construction materials, like bulk materials, we do in the civil space, we do a lot of what we call docket schedules and so docket supply. So the idea is you can establish a schedule in here. So, you know, things like bulk materials like, you know, aggregates, concrete, they tend to lend themselves well to this scenario. Same with fuel is another one, because prices fluctuating all the time, and it's sort of something that's difficult to order. And also things like labour hire and equipment hire. But the idea is you can set up these scheduler rates. So I've got, oh, that's a bad example. Let me use this labour hire one. I've got a labour hire schedule here as an example. So F&G Mining provide all these different people to me, and these are their rates. What will happen is when I use their labour hire in the field, I'll record the number of hours they work, and then I'll expect to pay that invoice later. Same with materials. You know, if I've got a rate per tonne of sand or crushed rock, I call up, get the delivery. On my job, I record the delivery docket. That'll actually accrue the cost in real time. So as I record the docket, it'll accrue the cost, and then that docket will sit in the system to be matched later to the invoice when the supplier invoice comes in. And if there's ever any discrepancy between what was originally docketed and the supplier's invoice, then Workbench will resolve that discrepancy and go back and correct the job costing. You know, so if you've got variances in weight or variances in rate because the rates, you know, the item you're purchasing is, you know, the rate's changing on a daily basis, Workbench will resolve the job costing for you on that. Does that make sense? The key thing being you can get your costs onto jobs on a daily basis, and you're not subjected to waiting to receive invoices from suppliers. And
you don't necessarily have to raise purchase orders either. No,
that's right. Yeah, absolutely. Because for a lot of our clients, particularly with some of these bulk materials and things like that, often they've got sort of more long-standing agreements, and it's just easier to record the docket when you get the stuff delivered. How much did we receive? What was the quantity? Because that's what you're going to pay. And yeah, it streamlines things. So that's the sort of docketing. Then plant. So obviously, if we talk about equipment, so obviously you can have your whole plant fleet set up here. For any equipment, the idea is that if I jump into an equipment item, you basically can set up all your equipment details. You can define rates for costing it. Okay, so this is sort of header information, code name, what group it belongs to. You can define some rates for costing it. The rate can be made up to 3 components. So normally base cost, overhead is normally R&M cost, another rate might be a fuel rate. You can define a little structure for managing the costs or the operating costs here. Extension columns is just all your equipment detail, basically whatever information you want to maintain about it. So that's basically the equipment item. Equipment itself is also, if I inquire on it, it's also a project. So the idea is you can drill in at any time and see what revenue it's generated and what it's cost to operate. And you can drill into it and go and see, so repairs and maintenance, there's been 330 maintenance hours booked against that piece of equipment. You could drill in and see, what that was. Here's all the time that's been booked on it, as an example. So that's equipment. And then if we just touch on timesheets, then I'll show you some of what we do in the field. So when we talk about timesheets, again, there's a whole range of timesheeting options. We've got desktop timesheets, mobile timesheets. Now we have an award interpreter. Now, I guess the key thing is, do your people work under an award?
Yes.
Is it your own or an industry award?
What, sorry?
Is it your own? Or
it's industry award.
Okay. So the key thing is you can establish any number of EBA, we call them profiles, but basically these are just a set of rules that govern what we do with the time. Okay, so you can set up any number of these rules as you like. And so if I jump into construction workers, the idea is that this defines how we treat the time, so each day of the week, and then what allowances we calculate, basically. So the reason we do this is once we start talking about timesheets, we want people to capture timesheets. There is a conflict between what payroll needs to pay someone and how a worker in the field is going to capture his time. So, the guy in the field, the time capture needs to be kept simple for him so he can book his time effectively to a job and say where he was working and what he was doing. But that's not necessarily the same detail that payroll needs. Okay, so it's sort of is necessitated you need the award interpreter to really effectively run timesheets in the field. Then timesheet wise, basically what we basically do, if I go to timesheet admin here, we're basically capturing a timesheet per person per week. I'll just go back a week. So I think I've got one here. So if I look at someone like Arthur, his timesheet's all complete. He worked 44 hours, so he had 44 hours charged to jobs for the week, 8 hours leave and 52 hours in total. If I drill into Arthur's timesheet, so you can see here each day of the week, the job he worked on. So he was working out at Heb Roadworks, doing labour as part of the bulk earthwork stage. He did 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours, 14 hours. And then on Friday, he took annual leave, so he booked the admin job 8 hours. So that's sort of what a timesheet would look like. If people were working on multiple jobs in the day, obviously you can have multiple lines on the same day of the week. Key thing being, if I look here, say on the Thursday, this one's actually already had the EBA run over it, but you see over here, see it says 8 under the payroll column. After the award interpreter's been run and it's gone away and done its interpretation, it's taken that 14 hours on the Thursday and said, well, that equates to all of these items for payroll. And that's what we're going to push up into Wise Payroll, basically, this detail here. Wise Payroll would still handle all your normal things like working out your leave accruals and all those sort of accruals will sit in payroll, but Workbench is just calculating all the payable items and pushing that up into the payroll system. So that's that. Any questions?
Justin, just be mindful of time too, Justin. Be 10 minutes or so, but good segue for any questions there. Colin, I know you don't have the ops guys there. We are recording this session, of course, so any questions do come from the video. We're happy to facilitate that. But any other comments or questions from Colin? Jack, there is that.
So the guys that are on site doing their timesheets, did I see on the website that there is a mobile app to make it?
Absolutely. Yeah, so absolutely. So with the, let me just show you. So with our mobile, we had the mobile, we actually, oh, it's gone to sleep on me. Hold on, I'll just start it up. We actually use a mobile framework. So we use the Upwise mobile framework, and we've developed a very extensive integration. So we've basically fully integrated it with our system. But it's actually also standalone, and what works really nicely, it has a full mobile app and a, come on, a full mobile app, and it has a desktop interface. But basically what it means is you cut your sort of supervisors and stuff, or they're sitting in the mobile app side of things, and your project managers and that are sitting back on the workbench side of things, looking after the financial aspects of the project. But to give you an example, if I just jump into here, into the Upwise. So this is the Upwise platform. There's a whole range of different operational modules in here. But to give you an example, if I go to projects, if I scroll down in here, where is it? Because it'll be in here somewhere. See Shojun Concrete, that was a demo job we set up. So at the project level, I could be looking at things in here. So it might be, there's things that we can do in here. For instance, we can upload sets of plans and drawings. So they might be accessing drawings in the field. This is a drawing function. Yeah, so they might be looking at slab drawings. And while they're out there in the field, they might want to take a photo about something. Maybe there's something damaged in the formwork or something. They can take a photo of it. You know, there might be like, we do a lot of what things like ITPs and things like that, forms, you know, quality forms. So you can fill in forms or just go and mark things on here. So we'll do all that. In terms of key project tasks, you can see I've ticked off some tasks here. So I've done the traffic management plan, the project risk assessment, and so on, and the project management plan. These, you can have tasks and stuff as part of actually doing the job, and they can be assigned out to people in the field. Plus, if I go to things like forms, you'll see here, that was one of the forms I did. So the traffic hazard checklist. So these are things like, these are digital forms. So the idea is you can create all these digital forms in here. Yes, comments, actions. Not sure about this thing.
You make them compulsory?
You can, yes, absolutely. Yep. So you can have like mandatory, like a job safety assessment that would need to be completed each day by a supervisor on site and stuff, and it can alert you if that's not done. Those sort of things. But yeah, so that's the sort of these sort of daily forms. Then in terms of what we're talking about, in terms of sort of time capture, we've got a few scenarios. Individuals could do timesheets. For a lot of our clients, what we are finding, and particularly in the sort of civil space, I'm not sure what your workforce is like, but some of our experience with other sort of concreting businesses in the past, sometimes the workforce is a bit transient, or let's say probably not the best people to do their own individual timesheets, but the supervisor might do the timesheet on their behalf. You know what I mean? He's running a crew on site. Yeah, so in that case, we would have like a daily diary. And the idea is this can be tailored as well to suit your requirements. So, you know, comments, this is a demo. What time do we start on site? We started on site at 7 a.m. today. It was 12 degrees when we started work. And I'll set my diary to start at 7 a.m. And then we've got all these different transaction types for what we want to capture. So if I'm capturing project hours on site, I could say, yep, I had some, you don't have to use these timesheet group filters, but let's say I had Alonzo and Arthur and Bo working. They were all doing general site labour as part of the formwork stage. They all worked for 8 hours and they all had one break. So these fields, in actual fact, we actually have around 25 different fields we actually capture within a time transaction, and we turn various fields on or off depending on what people's operating requirements are. So if you don't record breaks and you don't want to have timesheet groups and you don't want to record details, we just turn them off to simplify the data capture. But that's that. Maybe something like a docket, because we had some labour hire or something out there working as well, or maybe some concrete suppliers. Let's say we got some concrete. It was from Bunnings, that I could record the docket number if I want. What was the product they supply? So it's poured concrete as part of the concreting section. Let's say it was 20 cubes. I could take a photo of the docket if I wanted as well, because they've given me a delivery docket and I want to keep that for my records. And so that would be, what I'm capturing on the day. And then when I'm finished, I'll just submit the form. Okay, I've got to finish on site. So we finished on site, let's say at 3 p.m. Sign it off. And I'll submit it. Now all of that will now feed back up into the workbench, all that data. And basically when it comes back into workbench, it'll come back in as what we call a, I'll just run the sync. Comes back in as what we call a day sheet. And basically, but it'll job cost all of that data straight away. So in the day sheets here, you'll see this was one I tested yesterday for Shojun Concrete. Basically, that was how I got the transactions in originally. So all of that time that came in, all of that sort of activity that came in. So here's a header. We had a docket, so that was a delivery from Bunnings. There was some timesheet data, so that was Justin working. I didn't have any planned or outputs or stock used. In the attachments, it'll actually push through a PDF copy of the diary. So this is what a PDF actually out of the UpVise. So it actually has a PDF copy that will feed through as well. Because maybe when the times come in, with someone's miskeyed something or whatever, we're going to correct on the workbench side. Here's the original source document, if you like, on what was captured. So we've got that for audit purposes. There you go, 27th of July. That's what we just captured. So that's just fed through now. If I jump into that, then you see there's the timesheet data, there's the dockets, the attachments all come through. And how
regular is that sync happening in the background?
Every hour, typically, for most people. Yep. So there's all the data, 27th. So I see all that's now on the job straight away. So we've now got sort of real-time view of the costs.
Thank you, Justin. Just looking at the time, we've got 2 minutes. And as I mentioned before, obviously there's a whole lot more under the hood here, as you can see. But just to get a general gist of the usability of both the finance on the operations side. Probably just to yourself, Colin, I know you're in the evaluation phase, and just for yourselves and just to make sure you got something that suits needs for Shojun, not just now, but in the future, of course. That's vitally important that you pick something that can see you through. Where do you think you are, and is there anything that you need from us at this point in time to assist with that evaluation?
We probably just need to have an additional chat at some point, and in terms of trying to flesh out the pricing a bit more, so we can, I guess, see where it falls in line with the others that we've currently got.